Hey, everybody, welcome to the Rock Shop with Ralph, your source for all things entertainment. Tonight, my very special guest is former Megadeth guitarist, instrumentalist, and current podcast host, Mr. Jeff Young. How you doing, Jeff?
Ahoy, mateys.
Great.
What's
I got to
everybody
tell you,
doing out there? Is this YouTube land? Is that where we're going to be?
this is Facebook. This is going to be on Facebook and will be posted to YouTube, but we have over 5,000 followers on Facebook.
All righty then.
Yes, I got to tell you, Jeff, first thing is my quintessential Megadeth album is the album that you were on. So far, so good, so what? We're going to get into that, but I just had to get
a
that.
Controversial album, right?
Not for me, it wasn't, but I just want to tell you, it was reliving my youth right now.
Cool.
But all kidding aside, I want to appreciate you coming on the show with me. Thank you very much. And it's been a long time coming. A lot of snow, a lot of traveling through the snow to get here. But you're worth it, Mr. Young.
Good. Glad to be here.
All right. So what's going on in the world of Jeff Young? Everything okay over there?
Oh yeah, everything's cooking right along.
Great.
You know, last year was a shocker for a lot of people. But as a guitar player, what a lot of us learned in 2020 is that our entire lifestyle of practicing 14 hours a day, never leaving your woodshed, it's called quarantine.
Oh.
So we learned that, and it really wasn't much different for me. And actually, I was able to turn lemons into lemonade, and I
Make
got
the best of
3
the
singles
situation.
out last year. People can have a listen, have a gander at instrumentalguitar.net later if they dare.
Yes, we'll get into that. Well, let's start from the beginning. What are some of the influences that you had growing up?
Oh, well, it's a long story. I started playing viola in first grade, so there's always going to be a little bit of that kind of influence, that legato kind of bowed instrument sound. I wanted to play cello, and my mom wouldn't let me switch. Like every day in class, I was just staring across the room, looking at that big booming cello that was just, so deep, and it sounded killer. It's like when you hear bum, 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 right?
Right.
I don't think she wanted to be the designated cartage service running me all around town with that giant thing in first grade. I mean, it was taller than me. So
Don't feel so bad. I played the tuba.
right. And I switched. So I gave up. I got frustrated with the viola and switched and didn't do anything second grade. Then third grade, they came around with all the band instruments, oboes, trombones, tubas. I ended up with the tenor saxophone, which was really cool.
Cool.
And that kind of comes into play later. I started playing guitar around 14. I played tenor sax from third grade through ninth grade. And I actually played baritone in ninth grade because our baritone gal left. And so I had to learn bass clef and do that, which was cool, and it was a fun experience to have to use a different side of your brain so quick. But then I discovered guitar at age 14, and there was no looking back.
And the rest is history.
But a lot of those influences, because in band with a conductor, and he was pretty militant, I learned how to play with other people, how to read music and what all the rhythms were. And so I think that really helped me, although I wasn't a big fan of and he was my same band leader every year. He just like followed me around like a musical curse, but he was there. I think how hard he was on me made me a better musician. And then, because then at that point, there's no YouTube. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, not a lot of guitar teachers. I had to drive an hour each way just to get a great guitar teacher. And my mom was cool enough to do that every week, all the way out to the side of Dayton where the Ohio Players were from. So we were countrying far from Centerville and Kettering, Ohio, where I grew up. But this teacher was great. And he exposed me early on right away from the get-go, almost even before I could play guitar, I was into Kiss and UFO. I was
Yes,
huge on
sir.
Shanker. And I can send you a picture of me in the town show the year before I got on guitar. So I must have been 13. I was Paul Stanley in the talent show.
Wow,
We
cool.
had the fire and the flames and the logo and the whole bit, but I was just faking with the hands. By the next year in the talent show, I was really playing guitar.
Awesome.
Uh, I did Toys in the Attic and Skinnered instrumental Freebird, and that was a whole scene. Age 14. But I was already into Kiss, UFO, Montrose. I
Awesome.
was big on him and Zeppelin, Aerosmith, and Robin Trower. But just because of buddies that we all had album collections, and we'd fight over who was the best band on earth, right?
Speaking of Aerosmith, you took lessons from Steve Hunter, correct? Who
Yeah.
who's was the who's who? Anybody who's a guitarist knows that him and Dick Wagner were like the go-to guys in the '70s as far as solos, and he did the solo on "Train Kept It Rolling," and he also played guitar on Salisbury Hill for Peter Gabriel, correct?
Yeah. How that happened is
Well,
actually kind of a cool story, and on the heels of the huge loss we had with Eddie Van Halen last year, and just a huge influence for me. My management company post Megadeth was Diamond Dave Management, so that was Pete Angelus and Patrick Whitley, who managed Van Halen and left with Roth, and they had an office down in Beverly Hills, and they became my manager. And I think Pete's in the Gigolo video in the 7-Eleven when Dave's asking for the bottle of Jack and a glazed donut, or
glazed donut.
it's a glazed donut and a fifth anything or whatever. So, and that was just after Megadeth that I shopped a tape around Los Angeles with a lawyer, and I was lucky to get with this management company. And I remember one evening out of the blue, and my whole band was in my living room. The phone rings, and it's Pete Angelus, and he said, "This is right when I guess Steve Vai had left the band," and he said, "Dave heard your demo tape and wanted you to come over his house in Pasadena tonight to talk to him about being the next guitarist in his band to replace Steve Vai."
Whoa.
And in hindsight, I've kicked myself a few times for not doing it, maybe more than a few times. But first of all, my band was in my living room at the time, so that was kind of awkward. And
Wait, so are you saying that? Are
I don't
you
know, it
saying
just
that?
didn't feel right. Like I was kind of leaning towards more of a singer like David Coverdale or Chris Cornell, Paul Rogers, something like that. And they actually got kind of offended that I passed on it. Okay.
Wow, I was just about to ask you. So you're telling me that you passed on an audition for David Lee Roth?
Yeah.
Wow.
Was
Wow.
that a bad thing to do? I don't know.
Listen,
Literally,
I think I didn't want to jump. I didn't want to jump.
To be honest, I thought he's going to end up in Vegas. And what's the last thing he just did? So, and this was back just post Megadeth, right? So Jason Becker got the gig, right?
Yeah.
And he was my buddy, and I love Jason, and we were just becoming friends. And I remember the last time I saw him was at a NAMM show in California. And then when I heard he got the gig, I was really happy. And I heard they told me because of his style of playing, he hadn't done a lot of blues. And Dave's whole vibe is blues based, right? Kind of vaudevillian with a blues vibe. So they told me this was just over a quick phone call that they sent him up the Hollywood Hills up Gower to study with Steve Hunter. And the second I heard that, I was like, Well, I want to study with Steve Hunter because I knew, and he played the first half of the solo on the halftime section of Train Kept a Rolling. And then the double time when it picks up is Dick
Yeah.
Wagner. They also played together on Welcome to My Nightmare and
Alice
Goes to
Cooper.
Hell, which are two amazing Alice Cooper albums. The Peter Gabriel, and also Steve was with Lou Reed for all the Rock and Roll Animal, all the stuff we heard on the radio growing up, Sweet Jane, and that
Wow.
was Steve on guitar and all that stuff. So
Yeah, that's awesome. And let's not forget Dick Wagner, who was basically the Kiss man, did a lot of the solos in Kiss. And he just passed too as well a couple of years back. Maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit. I didn't want to throw that out you, but the events leading up to the Megadeth, because we're gonna speak about that a little bit. You were teaching guitar, obviously. That's well documented, and you were living in a house with label mates of Kiss. One of the members of Angel, Punky Meadows, correct?
yeah, here's how that happened. I moved out to Los Angeles. I almost said Los Angeles.
Yeah, Lost Angels.
I moved out to Los Angeles in 1984 to go to a Musicians Institute, Guitar Institute of Technology. And that was a 1-year vocational school at the time. And I had graduated and I was kind of looking around for something to do. I had been playing with some musicians at the school, but nothing really serious developed. And I heard about this. It was a placement service for musicians. Oddly enough, I knew Alice Cooper had found some musicians for his touring band.
He always finds great musicians. Alice.
This would have been like 85, 86, 87 era. And
around
Constrictor. It was a couple gals who had basically filing cabinets full of musicians' press kits, pictures, demo tapes, and whoever could come in there, whether it was a known band or just some musicians from around the Sunset Strip trying to get something together, they could come in and maybe find some synergy. So I went down there one night and they put in my demo tape and the girl started listening to it for like a minute. And she goes, is this you? You wrote this stuff? Is this you? I go, yeah. She goes, we love this stuff. We have your bass player on file. So my bass player had already beat me down there. The guy who I met at Musicians Institute. And that night they took me, it was kind of like a Hollywood movie. We know this guy. We know a guy.
We know a guy.
He's a photographer who's done album covers for Angel. And I loved Angel and Kiss and Motley Crue. His name's Barry Levine. And that night I was sitting in his living room in West Hollywood. They were playing in my tape. He loved it. And he ended up managing me. Little did I know, and it wasn't too short of order before I moved out of my apartment and I was in the house with him. Little did I know, in the back of the house, because we were in West Hollywood. It was a 2-story house. It looked like a crack house because it had bars on it, but the bars were really there to protect the 16-track recording studio that was upstairs. So my room was upstairs. We had a tracking room, a recording room, and downstairs Barry and the cat who owned the house, Chris Keys. And they didn't even tell me right away. I don't know how long I was living there. And I don't know how many times. I think he might have entered it was like a little a side area off the kitchen that I never saw the room. I never saw where he and his girlfriend lived. But suddenly one day, Punky Meadows is standing in our kitchen and I'm realizing he's living in the house with me.
Imagine that.
Right. And, at the time he had hair, he cut his hair. It was kind of the same style, but it was blonde. So it took me back, right? He's like, there's Punky Meadows. He's really tall with really short hair and it's blonde and he's living in my house with his girlfriend. So that was a kind of exciting moment in time. And long story short, Barry had done the On Earth as It Is in Heaven album cover, which had the cool reversible logo and the band was in the mirror. I think he did Hell of a Band as well. He done Shout at the Devil. He went on to do Girls, Girls, Girls while I was living in the house with him, and a bunch of other people. He was an amazing, gifted photographer, to be sure. And
Wow. What's I hear. Which brings us to one of the people you were living with in the house was or your student was Jay Reynolds.
that's the one person I didn't mention. He wasn't living there at first. He ended up taking a room downstairs. Yeah, he was in a band on Atlantic called Malice, and I started just giving him informal guitar lessons. I was above him. He was downstairs. Punky Meadows is in the back, and Barry actually hooked up. My first drummer is part of this project was Barry Brandt. He goes, well, and he brought him, he's going to help you like kind of learn how to arrange your songs, go into the studio. And he was very valuable. He was an amazing asset, and he kind of had a John Bonham style, which I really loved. So that was cool. So you had me leaving every day to go to a rehearsal studio in LA, which coincidentally, to this day, Chris Poland is the guy who runs this rehearsal studio, the guitarist from Megadeth that I replaced.
Right.
And so I'm going to rehearse with Barry Brandt. Punky's living in my house. Jay moves in. I'm giving him guitar lessons. And I do remember he was buddies with David Elfson, and he passed through the house a couple times, like really quickly. And, oh, this is Dave. And I didn't know Megadeth. I didn't know anything about really that genre of music at that time. And it was just a little bit later. I remember him playing me some cassettes of Peace Sells, and I think they were having some problems with Chris at the time, and they were thinking about replacing him. And I listened to it, and my head was in like a totally different place. I was really into Gary Moore and John Sykes.
Oh, wow.
Alan Holsworth.
Real bluesy based players.
Yeah, Steve Morse, and just a totally different vibe than that. So I listened to it. He's like, they might let you audition, and I kind of passed on that again. A theme's developing here.
Yeah.
But then it came around a little bit later, actually. Long story short, the band that was being built out of that house, and the whole thing kind of imploded. I moved out, and Barry and I kind of had a falling out. He kind of got a little too fatherly, and it was a little bit too much of like a Hitler regime in the household. So I moved out, and we didn't talk for 4 months. And this is the crazy thing, how opportunities like this happen. One day I just got a wild hair. I was going to Guitar Center on Sunset in Hollywood, and I lived over in the Valley, and I thought, I'm just going to call Barry up. I hadn't talked to him in 4 months, and bury the hatchet, so to speak. And I called him. I said, Barry, I'm coming into Hollywood. Would it be cool if I swang by? And it turned out he moved out of our band house, and he and his girlfriend were living right behind Guitar Center. So I went and did my business, went to his house, and we're sitting there talking. And I was about ready to leave. I mean, I had my keys and standing up, and the phone rang. And Barry picked up the phone, and I was, literally like almost walking out the door, and he kind of turned white, and he just kind of went silent for a minute. And he looked at me. He goes, this is really strange, because I haven't seen him in like 4 months, and he's standing right here, and he passed the phone to me. And that kind of took me back, because someone was calling his new apartment looking for me. And I said, hello. And it was Jay Reynolds. And he was suddenly cryptic on the phone. He's like, Jeff, he goes, I'm living over in Laurel Canyon, and I got to talk to you about a business opportunity. He goes, can you come over and talk? I said, I'm just I'm just leaving Barry's house. I got to cross that way to go home. Give me the address. I went to his place. He was living in a guest house in this really cool place in Laurel Canyon. And I walked in the door and he sat me down. He goes, Jeff, I got the Megadeth gig. He goes, and I didn't really know a lot about the band. I'd remembered what he'd said and played me a little snippets, but I'd never heard Peace Cells in its entirety. He goes, I need you. Remember what we were doing at the house. I want to hire you to help me figure out Chris Poland's solos from the 2 previous albums, Peace Cells and Killing, because he knew I had a really good ear and I could figure stuff out from just listening off the turntable. I'll pay you $50 an hour. Plus, you got to help me write solos for the new album because they only got like 2 weeks left, and the tour starts in Europe. They were doing a show. It was like Testament, Overkill, Megadeth, and maybe one other band I might be forgetting. It was called Christmas on Earth, and the album had to be done and turned in. So I said, okay, So I think it was the next day or a day later, I started going down to the Music Grinder, which was cool because I know Alan Holsworth had worked there, and so had the Go-Go's. Which, strangely enough, one day I was sitting there writing solos for that record, and there was a two-way window from the inside. You could see out; they couldn't see in. And I'm just sitting there practicing, working on one of the Megadeth tunes. And one day, Belinda Carlisle just put her nose right up against the window, and she goes, "Let me in, let me in."
Yeah.
She came in, and she went back in the back. I guess she knew the people from the studio, but I went down to that studio and I started teaching Jay in a little side room. We had a music stand and it was real quiet. And he started playing me. I think the first thing he played me was Hook and Mouth, right? And the first thing I thought when I heard it, and I knew he liked Michael Schenker, and he had a Flying V, and I thought I could do maybe like a repetitive kind of Flight of the Bumblebee kind of thing. And so I started writing it right there. And, to be honest, when I heard Chris's solos and I heard how good he was, the first things that I noticed is that he was influenced by Alan Holsworth and Mahavishnu, which were, artists I loved and had figured out. So that was already, kind of in my blood. And I could hear Jeff Beck. And of course, they covered the Jeff Beck Ain't Superstitious on Peace Cells, which I'm sure Chris Poland had a lot to do with that. And I knew Jay's playing, and Malice was kind of like a Judas Priest knockoff, right? And it wasn't computing. And to be honest, the night I got that opportunity, before I even got home, I left Jay's house and I drove over into the valley, and I couldn't even wait to get home. I stopped at a 7-Eleven. There used to be a thing called payphones.
Yeah, right.
I called my parents back in Ohio on a payphone. I said, Mom, Dad, I just got this offer to give lessons to this guy. He just got the gig in this band. They're on the same label as the Beatles. The big round building, Capitol
Records.
My parents reference because, they're totally out of the music scene. But, now at this point, they knew it was serious as soon as I said that. And I just said, I don't think he can do this gig, because he's was a rhythm guitar player in Malice. And Chris Poland's one of the greatest guitar players on the planet, right?
So
I said, I think I could get this gig. Should I try? And they were like, oh. They said, don't try to steal it out from under him.
Step on anybody's toes.
He's like, just go there. And because they knew, I kind of told them, go down to the studio, teach him, and let them see for themselves. And if they're smart enough, they'll figure it out. And that's exactly what I did. And that's exactly what happened. First Chuck would come through the room, and, I think Elfson came in a couple times, and they'd walk through. And the Hook and Mouth solo isn't easy to play. It's actually really hard. I wanted something that was kind of repetitive and that repeated so that he could play it, but then it was so fast unless you have a really good picking hand, it's really hard to play, and it's kind of
Right.
classically influenced. So
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just want to say one thing. So what you're saying is that Jay had the gig, and you came up with all the solos, and you were feeding him the solos. So it was basically you anyway, and he was going to go. He was going to go from there and play your solos. That's how it was going to be.
and then I
Uh-huh.
was going to figure out Chris's and help him play those. So,
Right.
you know, so I don't even know if he ever tried to go in and play the hook and mouth thing. I don't think he got through it, but long story short, my parents said, don't try to do it. Let them see the thing. And I think Chuck and Elson and there was a second assistant, Gadget, and the studio assistant, Matt Friedman. They were all kind of running, I think, feedback back to Dave Mustaine.
Michael Wagner.
Because I didn't see him in the studio throughout the whole recording process, except maybe once in the hallway. And he didn't seem to be in a very good mood that day when I said hello. So
That's a shock.
I just went in and started working on my solos again. But so yeah, the plan was I'd help him write solos, kind of give him guitar lessons, get his playing, kind of like what Steve Hunter was doing with Jason Becker, helping him get the blues side because Jason had the speed, and Jason was a prodigy, and that's a whole different thing. So I chilled back and I gave him the guitar lessons. And to be honest, in my own career, besides this one little job giving guitar lessons, I was really getting frustrated with the vibe in LA and not being able to get a band of players that could all play, had the look, would contribute, were all focused. It's like a chemistry experiment. So I remember telling my buddy, we went to a rodeo and we were coming home, and I was telling him, dude, I think I'm like 3-4 months from blowing this pop stand, maybe try New York or Austin, Texas, or maybe going to London. I mean, because LA is just not happening. I came home and my message light on my answer machine was blinking, and I pushed play, and it was Dave Mustaine, and he asked me to come down to the studio the next day, and we walked up and down Melrose, and he gave me a cassette of 60 seconds of In My Darkest Hour. It was like the solo, maybe a 20-second lead up, and maybe 10 seconds after. And we went back to the studio. He put it in the player and he goes, okay, start here, stop here, see you tomorrow. And so I went home that night and I just had that little cassette and I just kind of improv'd over it and came up with a sketch, like an outline. And this is the moral to the story that I always tell, that, success is where preparation and a hell of a lot of it and sacrifice and luck intersect, right? And it just so happened at the time that even though I was without a band, I was at home and I had just graduated GIT, and your chops kind of go down while you're in the school because you're going to classes. So I was really working hard, playing 14 hours a day. I remember figuring out a lot of Gary Moore licks and Holsworth stuff at the time. And I'd already figured out the entire Alcatraz album while I was going to GIT, because I was really big on Yngwie, as you might be able to tell on the Megadeth album. So my chops were up, is the point. So when I got the call, maybe if I wouldn't have been playing for 2 weeks or just got back from a vacation or just got over being sick, but it just so happened my chops were up. I got the call. I went down and I didn't know anyone in the studio. And it was Paul Lanny, the producer, which he went on to do a really cool album, Enough's Enough Strength, which is an amazing album he did right after the Megadeth. And just prior, he had done the Alcatraz Disturbing the Peace with Steve Vai, and that kind of comes into play later in that evening. So I went in, it was nighttime, and I brought my rig and my guitar, and I just got a new Tom Anderson Strat. So I wasn't even really that used to it. And I had a scalloped neck, right? but I'd been used to that because I'd scalped my own neck while I was going to GIT and messed it up. But I wasn't really used to the guitar and I didn't know the people. So if the mixing board is here, right, and all the speakers, I went to the back of the room in the back wall and I just kind of stood there with my back to everyone and they pushed record. And I did a couple passes, just what I was kind of hearing in my head the night before in my apartment, that I was just kind of getting a sketch. And they were all jumping up and down and they really liked it. And Paul Lanny said he hadn't had this much fun since he worked with Steve Vai on that album. And so that made me feel good. And they're like, okay, we want you to come back tomorrow. And they gave me another. And I think that was Hook and Mouth, which I already had a start on. And I came back and did Hook and Mouth the next day. And then they gave me another tape. Maybe it was Liar 502. And since that was a short solo, I think I went in the other room and just played over it and then went out and did it. And so I never got to rehearse with the band or get to know them or know the songs. I never heard any of the full songs with vocals, or I was just getting like little sound bites and like put a solo here, put a solo there, and so that's kind of a strange way to come in, but I did manage to get everything done in that 2 weeks. And so that got me a plane ticket to go play that Christmas on Earth gig in London, and the rest is history.
Wow. That's amazing. Well, two things I want to say. First thing is, In My Darkest Hour is my favorite Megadeth song, hands down. I mean, and you're a big part of that. I thank you so much. It's part of the soundtrack to my life. So just to elaborate a little bit on it, do they offer you, are they saying, okay, you're a full-fledged member of the band, or are you just an application for employment? Is this, are you just an employee of the band? Are you going to be involved with future albums? I mean, is that how it was going to be?
Well, it's easy to tell the truth of the story, which is quite astray from what's been
Said.
told on the other side.
We could say it in a couple of short words. I know what you mean.
At first, it was a salary thing, $400 a week, plus all my bills paid, my rent, plus we were getting merch money. Because for a band like Megadeth,
merch is big.
So enough said there.
There you go. After
the tour, and it was kind of towards the end of the tour because, and I don't know if my parents urged me or some of my musicians friends, we had a partnership agreement where it was going to be the three of us in a three-way partnership, not Chuck, but Mustaine, Ellison, and myself. And that's really, they didn't want to sign that. And that's really what
led to everything.
The rest of the stuff is just drama.
Yeah, we don't have to go into that.
Spun to kind of help destroy my career because he doesn't like other people going on to be successful when it has nothing to do with Megadeth.
I can tell you, as a fan, I did see you at the Beacon Theater in New York with Warlock, and I said at the time when I first saw you and play, I'm like, this guy has to stay in the band. I mean, it was just like, it was a night and day difference. I mean, as far as Dave,
you seen with Chris Poland too?
I saw him with Chris Poland prior.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
But how was that? I love Chris.
Chris, amazing player. And you replacing him, I was a little kept aback at first, but like I said, when I saw you at the Beacon Theater, I'm like, this guy is for real. I mean, you tore it up.
Care with his solos because that's the real reason I took that gig, was because I could instantly, I mean, it doesn't matter. The second you hear his solos and his tone, you're just like, this is a serious fucking musician right here. And I heard the Holsworth influence, and that's right what I was into. It was just like right up my alley. So what I did was I went down to Capitol and I got the master tapes from Killing and Peace Sells, and I soloed all his rhythms and just made a cassette of just Chris's rhythms. And then, so I would have the album and I could go back and forth. And then I did all his solos, just soloed. So there's nothing but his solo. And then I could put it in my little Marantz cassette deck and slow it down and just earball it over. I spent hours. We never really rehearsed as a band. I think we rehearsed because we had to be, on stage so soon after I was introduced into the project. Uh, I think maybe before the tour, we rehearsed what, 3 times, 4 times at the most before we were on tour. So a lot of the rehearsal was me by myself at home, just being sure that I was prepped and just really knowing his solos. And I think if you go back and like, if you find Devil's Island from that era or Boots, like these boots are made for walking. I was playing them like I think as close as anyone's ever played them.
Yeah. I mean, let's just take into perspective the album. I mean, you got these songs that they still do Anarchy today. In My Darkest Hour, they do. I mean, Set the World Afire, Hook and Mouth, all these songs are classic songs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and you, at the very least, you got to tour the world. You played Monsters of Rock. You toured with Iron Maiden on the Seventh Son. Dio, you toured with Dio as well.
Dream Evil Tour.
Dream Evil Tour.
That was my first arena tour.
Wow. How was that?
Good way to go in. And Ronnie was super cool and quite the gentleman, as you would expect. And we had a great time. Very cool. Nice.
That's one of my heroes. But yes. So I mean, I'm sorry. Go ahead. You were talking about the Dream Evil Tour.
That was the end. I was just saying he was a gentleman. I could only add that I know you've been checking my YouTube out.
Oh yeah.
You can tell that I've spent some quality time listening to Dio and Vivian Campbell.
Yeah, that's a. I was telling you prior, the biggest hits we got related to you were the Heaven and Hell that you did, the Rainbow in the Dark, and playing with Michael Anthony as well. I mean, those all my guitarist friends is like, ask him this, ask him that, ask him about his V, and they always bring up your V, your flying V guitar.
Yeah, I call that my. I mugged Michael Schenker and ran away. Flying V. I got that back, for a long time. I sold all my guitars, and it's a whole long story. My amps, I only played nylon string and steel string acoustic, flamenco, and classical. And so when I started playing electric again, I had to buy everything from the ground up. A lot of people ask me, do you still have any of the Megadeth era guitars or amps? And unfortunately, I don't. This was the first electric guitar that I got on kind of my journey back, my don't call it a comeback, as I like to call it. It's a 2010 Gibson that I got directly from Gibson. I got hooked up with one of the artist relations guys there, and he sent it to me, and it's been with me ever since. And it's an amazing sounding guitar. The thing about a Flying V, like Les Pauls are cool, but they have a lot of tuning problems. The headstocks break off a lot, and a lot of guys have already used that sound. Flying V, I think they were trying to come up with something that looked really cool and futuristic, and in the process stumbled across something that sonically, because of the way I'm looking at it's just right here, because of the way the V bouts, these extreme bouts. If you think about when you hit the string, it's like dropping a pebble in a pond and the ripple of sound. The way the sound wave travels across the top of that guitar to those extreme bouts, when you like chunk on a note, it's just like, it's like a kick drum if you have a good amp. But it's not only great for rock and hard rock, they're great guitars for blues. I mean, Albert King and, Schenker always had a great blend. That's what I always loved about him, between bluesy and classical melodies.
Who has a great album out, by the way. Schenker just released a new album.
So. Oh yeah. It's amazing what I've heard so far. So there's a mid-range clack that the V's have. So, the two electrics that I use the most right now is I have a Ingve Strat. It's a newer one with the Duncans, and I have the Flying V. And between those two, I'll use use the Flying V to get like on In the Flesh. If you listen to that, for example,
I posted that one.
It's really chunky and fat. The rhythm guitar is the V. All the leads, every lead is the Strat on different pickup settings, but it's all the Strats. So you can hear, you know, the contrast of the sound on that. But I also have behind me, I don't want to neglect.
That's your new baby.
Well, there's two of them in there. I got the behind in the case behind not open. And I don't have enough guitar stands, and those things are big. I have a green slime, Dina ML, and I got the Cowboys from Hell, the blue with the lightning bolt.
Pantera
is behind in there. Yeah. So
Cool.
I love those two, and they just got a great fat sound. And when I need a Floyd Rose, and these, everything's in weird tunings because I use a lot of weird tunings.
So I mean, I want to make sure we get this as well. You left Megadeth, okay, and you were gone for 10 years. You didn't play guitar, correct? You just stopped playing.
No, well, I did all the way. I was still in LA putting a band together right up until 94 when the Northridge earthquake hit. And at that point, I took that as my cue to exit stage left. And my father had just passed away, and my mom needed my help in the family business. So I ended up cutting my hair. I went to Wharton Business School in Pennsylvania, and became a sucker in a 3-piece. And
as the Van Halen song
saved the company because it was also like my inheritance. So, but while I was there, that's when I got the itch. And it just so happened the drafting guy at our company was a drummer, and he knew a singer who knew a bass player. And before you knew it, we were gigging around, you know, downtown Dayton and all the clubs and playing. And one thing led to the next. I decided I was going to do my own album using, you know, nylon string, steel string, 12 string, a little electric, and doing it all myself. And I ordered a nylon string guitar from a guy here in New York, and he happened to know the Assad family, Brazilian guitar dynasty. And that led me to working with Baji Assaji and studying with a lot of people in America don't know, but Sergio and Odaye Assaji. In the classical world, among all the guitar players, you ask anyone who's the greatest duo out there, and I think the Wikipedia says something to the effect of the greatest classical guitar duo in existence, perhaps in history. And they're the bomb. And they trained with Segovia, one of his proteges, in Rio de Janeiro. And it was just a blessing to sit at the feet of the brothers at like Christmas and Thanksgiving, and out at bars partying when they're buzzed and people are having them, you know, take requests. I got to be around just the most brilliant musicians, and that was an amazing experience. And again, it came out of, you know, not trying to make it. It's kind of similar with the Megadeth. I wasn't looking for it. It kind of just came. I was just there in Dayton. I was going to just make my own indie album for fun. And through this guitar maker who knew this family, it led me into this whole new life. And I ended up, I got the younger sister Baji a record deal with Verve Polygram, legendary jazz label. And I ended up living in Brazil for 4 years. We toured the world and had an amazing experience, opening for Joe Cocker in Europe and Cassandra Wilson, and
played Farm Aid,
Australia, New Zealand, Philippines. We did Farm Aid 2000. We did Lilith Fair, which was amazing. And I'm like, how are we here?
Right. And this
little Brazilian world music thing. And we're on stage. We're about to go live on country music television.
Yeah.
You know, opening for Willie Nelson and Neil Young and Mellencamp. And I pulled Billy Sheehan in to play bass with us.
Wow.
One of the tunes you can find on YouTube. Yeah.
I got to get that up there. And by the way, that album, I would, yes, thank you. That album was #1, correct? In Germany. It charted higher than Madonna.
In Holland. Yeah. I was in Holland sitting in Amsterdam when we had to go play this festival. And I'm like, looking at our singles above Madonna's. I'm like, there's some justice in this.
Right. Yeah. And you also got that in a movie as well. It Runs in the Family with Kirk Douglas.
And you did your research, yeah.
Michael Douglas and Cameron Douglas.
That, and again, how the music business works. That was kind of, we had already done all the touring for the album, and
Waves.
the whole
Waves was the song.
the cycle was over. And out of the blue, our Verve rep from the UK called me one day and he said, "Hey, Jeff, they're going to use Waves in the first, and I think it's the only movie that Michael Douglas did with his father, Kirk Douglas.
And the
I
grandson.
just saw in the news this
Cameron
week.
as well. The Michael Douglas's son. It was 3 generations of the Douglases.
And Bernadette Peters was in the movie.
Who's from?
Amazing actress and singer.
She's from my hometown,
The
Ozone
cool
Park,
thing
Queens.
is with soundtracks, a lot of the times the song will be just very quick. You'll hear 10, 15 seconds. It just so happens if people want to go check it out, the movie's called It Runs in the Family. And the scene, Bernadette Peters is sitting at a sewing machine talking to her girlfriend on the phone. And the song runs for the whole time in the background because it's a real cool, tranquil song, something you could dig at the beach, you know, around a campfire playing guitar. So we were really stoked that song got that extra
Oh yeah,
life. Yeah.
definitely. Well, I mean, one other thing we put up there as well was you did the Randy Rhoads Remembered.
Mhm.
That I got to ask this question too because my all my fans and my friends are asking me to asking me to tell you this. What was it like playing with those guys? I mean, and the tribute to Randy. You played with Joel Hulkstra, James Lomenzo, who plays on a lot of your solo stuff, who was in White Lion, Pride of Glory, with Zach Wilde. I mean, he was actually in Megadeth as well.
Well, how that happened was I had Brian Tichy on my radio show. That led to him playing on the first single off my
Great drummer.
My new instrumental album. It's like my first ever all instrumental. And I'm releasing it one track at a time, and we're 4 deep. So the first one was Monsoon, and I got a cellist on there. Remember back in first grade, my mom wouldn't let me. I got my revenge. So and
Viola is next.
Amazing. You might have seen her with Joe Bonamassa at Royal Albert Hall doing that amazing song. So Tichy was on my show, and often Tina Grow was on my show too. That's how I got them both on Monsoon. When the artist comes on my show after the interview, we should do something together. And sometimes it actually happens. So Tichy was putting together, he does the Bonzo Bash, and now he was going to do Rhoads Remember out at the NAMM show. Since this is international, it's the National Association of Music Merchants, and it's a huge convention that happens twice a year in America. In the summer, it's in LA, well, Anaheim, and in winter, I think it's in Nashville. So every night after NAMM is an event where all the merchants, anything that you could buy, from a guitar pick to a guitar, to a drum set, to a piano, to the light show, PA system, and everything in between, is on display. And because of that, lots of musicians from LA, therefore lots of, famous people, from Stevie Wonder to James Lomenzo to, anyone that you would name, is going there to see the companies they endorse and sign autographs and meet fans and see the new gear. So every night after that, of course, what are we going to do?
We're going to jam.
Put on concerts. We go jam in bars. And a lot of musicians in recent years took to renting out theaters for after the show. And Randy Rhoads and Bonzo Bash, they're all connected. And then there became Ronnie Montrose Remembered, which I also did. So I ended up doing all 3 of those. But the Randy Rhoads was the biggest. And the first one was really cool at NAMM because there were so many great guitar players. We had Joel Hoekstra, Rowan Robertson, Mike Orlando, Alex Skolnick. God, so many people. Phil X, Brian Tichy even played guitar, Chris Cafferty, Phil Dremel. Wow. And based off the success of that, we planned a East Coast tour, Randy Rhoads Remembered, and that's the Diary of a Madman.
Rudy Sarzo
video. The coolest thing about the whole thing is who's playing bass. It's Rudy Sarzo. who played with Randy in
Yep.
both Quiet Riot and Ozzy. So there you are on stage. You know, Titchy's a great drummer. You know,
Yeah.
he both Aldridge and him have been in Whitesnake. You
White
got Rudy
Snake, Dead
Sarzo right
Daisies.
there, and all these great guitarists. And we did Over the Mountain for 3 guitars because Randy triple tracked his guitars. So
Yeah.
we had Robert Sarzo also did it. Mike Orlando and me did that. And then on the tour, I think we switched off maybe Brent Woods, Chris Caffrey, and me, and we'd switch it up. But that diary, the cool thing about the video on my YouTube, the Diary of a
I
Madman,
posted it. I posted on my page.
that was a magic night because we were in Rhodes Island. They, you know, I don't know if they officially renamed the city for the day, but we sure as heck did. And there was just something in the air that night. The people were really close. It was a really cool club with a really cool energy. And, you know, Joel Hoekstra did this acoustic thing on it. He was doing all the acoustic and I was doing all the electric, and Diary is an amazing song. And it was just like, that was like, I felt the closest that I came to like channeling Randy.
Wow. Yeah.
Like I just felt like it was just right.
I know I told you my guitarist friends, two videos they want me to ask you about one was the Randy Rose Remembers. The other one was playing with Michael Anthony. Ain't Talking About Love. That was a big hit on my page as well. That had to be surreal for you.
Well, how that happened was, you know, I was living in Vegas and jamming down on the Vegas Strip at a venue called Hard Rock Live. Now there's 2 Hard Rocks. I think they closed one, and I don't even know what's happened since last year. But there was the Hard Rock on Paradise with the big guitar that lit up, and that was the hotel casino. On the Strip, it was more like a 3 floor. The bottom floor was merch. Second floor was restaurant, and then a bar that looked over the whole Strip. It was killer. And the stage was ginormous, and you're looking out over the whole Strip. You know, so you're seeing Mandalay Bay across the street. That was an amazing event. So I was playing there with a local band, and they were doing covers, and they had a residency there. And the singer of that band became the producer of this award show called the Rock Gods. And what that was about, and it happens every year, and I think they moved it to the Canyon Club out in California, but it's to honor musicians who were in big bands, but maybe they weren't the star member of the band, or maybe they were a session player on a bunch of stuff and people don't know. So it's to raise awareness, and then everyone gets up and jams the songs. And this year, Michael Anthony was getting the Bass God Award. His tech of 35 years at the time, now longer than that, Kevin Doogie Dugan was getting an award. The keyboard player who played on Reelin' in the Years from Steely Dan, who I love, I was stoked to hear that. Dave Amato from REO Speedwagon was getting a guitar. I also got a Guitar Rock God Award. Bunch of other people. There was drummers, Scott Coogan, a bunch of folks. Lon Friend, who you guys may remember from Headbangers Ball, even got a Rock God Award for what he did in music. And it was just a great night of music. And I had to get up there and do a Megadeth song. And it was kind of awkward because the stuff on So Far So Good, So It's really hard to play and sing. And I had to do Symphony of Destruction, which I didn't think was that cool. So for me, my part, that I didn't really enjoy doing that, but I did learn his solo note for note and did that. And so, but then they needed someone to play with Michael Anthony, and we'd already been jamming Van Halen tunes. And when you see the video, the singer, he's great at the Roth. He was the organizer. He was the producer. He pulled me in to do that. And it was just the best. That's like a bucket list. I
Right.
mean,
Cross that
from
off.
the time came out, all I did was sit in my bedroom with my turntable, slowing that down to 16 and trying to figure out every lick Eddie did, you know, from Van Halen 1 through, you know, Diver Down.
Right. Well, I can tell you, all my guitarist friends, they told me make sure that I tell you this, that you sounded just like Eddie, note for note, tone wise, everything. They says you were unbelievable. So yeah, and this is coming from a lot
I got
of
to play
guitars.
4 tunes, so I can send you somebody, get me a doctor. I did, which was killer. That was the first song we did. I was just like, wow, running with the devil, ain't talking about love, and everybody wants some.
Wow.
And he was so fun. And as you saw, and ain't talking about love, that breakdown,
Yeah.
me and Michael Anthony just
Oh
jamming.
yeah, you were getting into it with him.
The dude on the cowbell in the background, that's the Steely Dan keyboard player. He just wanted to be involved.
He just wanted to be involved. I'll play the cowbell
Keyboards and sing backgrounds back here. I don't care, man.
Yeah, this is a magic moment.
It was a magic moment
Wow.
in Vegas, and the room was packed.
But I mean,
Michael really loved it, and his tech really loved it, and they said some really kind words for me on tape after the show that I got to play on my radio show. And I know there's going to be an Eddie Van Halen
tribute
memorial show.
It's coming.
Ed Sure.
I'm Jeff,
scared. I don't want to presume, but I want to email Doogie and said, dude, you remember what a good time we had? Just keep me in mind, because I'd love to get up there.
But you got to do something. I mean, you're involved with all these major players, all these great players. You're always all these videos. You got all these people. You got to get some sort of band together, man. Come on, man, get back out there.
Well, I'm back out there with my instrumental stuff, and I got the baddest band. The way I'm doing it this day and age is, my buddy's texting me about the
Super Bowl. Yeah. No, I meant get back out there with the harder stuff.
Well, let me tell you what I got going.
Yeah.
I made a point, like when I moved back out to LA, and what I'll say to everyone is that I noticed a big difference, like what happened with the Megadeth thing and what happened with the Brazilian thing for me. And that all happened pre-internet. Like the internet I remember making Baji's first website on Front Page or something. It was so primitive. The internet was just coming out to the public. Since the internet, it's way tougher to, just to do anything in the music business, because people aren't buying albums. They can just stream your music for free. And it's just a whole scene that I don't want to get into. But for me, I made a point when I went back out there, like I didn't want to get typecast into like the Sunset Strip thing or like the 80s vibe or any kind of hair metal or any of that. So I made an effort to kind of search out players like Rick Firabaci, who's been my bass player on all my stuff. And folks can Google his resume because it's way too long to list here, but he's currently out touring with Blood, Sweat, and Tears, and Billy Cobham, who's quite the drummer, drumming legend. And he's toured with Yanni and Shakira and played with a bunch of great guitar players, from Guthrie Govan to Frank Gambale, Joe Hoekstra. He's one of my favorite bass players on the planet. He plays fretless and he's just incredible. So he's on Monsoon, In the Flesh, and he's on the new vocal track that's coming out, Gypsy Soul, that I'll tell you in a minute about what's happening with that. So I've been using Rick on everything, and he's just amazing. And it's just really easy. He comes in, like, for example, when you hear Gypsy Soul, when it comes out, I posted the studio pictures. I think you shared them.
Yes.
We went in. That's the first day I met him and Shane, the drummer. First time we shook hands, I showed him the changes, and we threw the stuff down to 2-inch. 2 of the songs were first take, and Gypsy
2-inch
Soul
tape, ladies and gentlemen,
was third take, because Shane wanted to get to the drums at the beginning. We wanted it to sound like a tour bus or a semi truck coming over the horizon. So we did 3 takes of that. These players are so good. Shane, who's also in Gypsy Soul, and a couple other things that'll be coming out, is recorded with Yngwie and Shanker and Vinnie Moore and a bunch of people. He's just an amazing drummer. He has an amazing instrumental band you need to check out called Cosmo Squad, and they're just sick. So good. And on Slow Burn, my other new single, James Lomenzo and I have been working together on a few things. So I have a few things in the can with him. amazing bass player. I don't know if people know he's out touring with John Fogerty right now.
Oh, I know James since his White Lion days back in the 80s. I used to see him at Lemoore in Brooklyn.
He's done a ton, from
He's
White
done a
Lion to Slash, Black Label, Pride and Glory,
yeah.
uh, Megadeth. He was in
Megadeth.
Megadeth longer than me.
Yeah.
And
And
so
Jimmy
James and I
DeGrasso.
like working together for that reason, like two booking Megadeth members from different eras. And his bass playing on Slow Burn is so melodic and beautiful. Every time I hear it, it's, I just like, wow, man, he really outdid himself on that. And the drummer on Slow Burn is Jeff Bowders, who plays with Paul Gilbert often and Satriani. He's
Wow.
also played with Shakira, strangely enough. And so I got myself a little stable, like the A level players and session cats out there. And depending on what song it is, I'll say, hey, I think this song's perfect for you. And whether we do it out in LA in person or we've done songs long distance,
Wow, that's great.
and I release it one song at a time because people are kind of out of the, let's buy an album and sit down.
Yeah,
And
it's
thing.
better to just release a single.
Yeah, once I get 12, 13 songs, then I'll put it all together. But I'm just trying to make each song an event and its own experience. And I'm doing
Makes
all
sense.
kind of pirate independent. So that's a whole nother story right there.
Sure, you send me whatever you have. I'll post it.
I have a new new vocal tune. I'm so on the instrumental bit. I have a new vocal tune coming out with Shane on drums, Rick on bass, and a really great LA-based singer that I think you guys are going to be knocked out by the vocal performance, the tune. It's really different and cool. It's I wrote it on dobro guitar. You might be able to see.
That's the one that you showed me.
Yeah. I just got it. I got it to go in because I didn't have a dobro. I was between dobros, and I wrote the tune originally on that. So as soon as the vocals were done, that's the next thing to go down, and then maybe the V and the choruses.
Yeah,
it's
the V.
like,
the V. That's everybody keeps asking me about the V. The V. That's all they keep saying.
The song's kind of King's X meets Chris Whitley. It's got a bluesy dobro kind of thing, but there's a King's X kind of thing.
Do we want to say the singer's name?
And it's really funky too. There's a lot of funk at it. I grew up in Ohio where the Ohio players are from, so that's always kind of run through. I don't want to say the name yet. As soon as the vocals are done and in the can.
All right, no problem. So
we've already got kind of the plan how we're going to start unveiling, and we've got pictures of the singer and the whole bit. So hopefully if she gets done with the vocals, well, it's a girl. So there's that.
There you go.
If she gets done with the vocals this weekend, you guys might be hearing a name this week.
Oh, great. Leslie, you are a podcast host. You have a show called Music Without Boundaries, who I tune into often, and I listen when I can, at work, at home, whenever I can. And that's on Spreaker. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Going on 10 years on the air. My very first show, we opened with an acoustic jam. It was Michael Lee Smith from Stars, Alex Kane from Life, Sex, and Death, and myself, Alex and me on acoustic guitars and backgrounds, and we did Stars' biggest hit, Cherry Baby, and that was like the opening 4 or 5 minutes of my show. We went on to kind of establish the vibe of the show, whether it's three guys or I have a lady guest or one guest, just sitting around in a pub or in your man cave or in your living room talking about music, the music we love so much, whether it's classic artists, new artists. But the thing about my show that I think sets it apart from other shows is that I play music from all genres, from classical to jazz to blues to speed metal. I don't know if I played any polkas. I play music from the 20s.
You played 80s last week.
Everything in between. Each week it's a different theme, and we intertwine the music with clips from movies or comedy or talking breaks where I talk about the music and artists.
Oh, by the way, I
I'm
have to
trying
say,
to maybe knock down the walls between genres of music and the separatism, because like all my music, like if you ask, has there's funk in there, there's classical in there, there's gypsy jazz, there's blues
right,
in there, there's rock, there's metal, all in one song. And I know a lot of people they don't just like one style of music, they like to hear a diversity. And there's plenty of radio shows who just focus on like, this is the smooth jazz station, or
right,
this is the all classical station, and this is your classic rock serious station that plays the same 100 songs over and over. My show's not that. We're playing deep cuts. I'm playing, if it's an artist, it's deep cuts. And a lot of times it's artists that people don't know, because what I've had the luxury of between Megadeth and the Brazilian project and traveling the world, I always made a point to like find that mom and pop record store and ask them what's like the coolest local regional music. And also the record company from whatever region you're in, they'll give you albums of their regional artists. So I just ended up with all this cool music. The average, man and lady in their day-to-day life, they'd never be exposed to this music because they got too much other stuff going on. So coming to my show gives folks a chance to discover music that they'd probably never hear anywhere else.
right. And I got to give a shout out because I tune into your show, and one of your biggest fans is Wendy Gold, her and her husband. So hi, Wendy, how you doing? I told her I was going to say hello on your interview. So
Not
there you
just
go.
biggest fans and loyal listeners. They promote my show. They're like a 2-person PR ninja force.
Yeah, yeah.
They get blocked on social media for sharing the show too much, and all these groups. They're great. I wish all my listeners were like that, because it's really a grassroots thing. Everything that I'm doing,
Right, word of mouth.
all listener supported. That's really, and I like to talk about that in interviews. And it's not just with me. It's whether you're a musician or a dancer or a sculptor or a painter or an author. The new business model is, especially if you want to do stuff outside, the narrative, outside what the mainstream programming is all about.
Right.
It doesn't coincide with that. You're going to have to go indie, and we need people to support us. And whether you're going to support Jeff Young and 2 other artists, or me and a sculptor and a painter or a ballet dancer, it doesn't matter who it is. Everyone needs to find those 1 or 2 artists that they just die for and buy their merch, support all their crowdfunding, find out what their PayPal me link is, because that's how I keep my show going. And
Right.
that's how I'm releasing the music.
Well,
Back when I had a lot of cash, I was funding it myself, and I wasn't, I waited as long as I could to embrace the crowdfunding, but now I see it's kind of the new business model,
right.
especially again, if artists want to be autonomous and have control of their music and not, have 100 hands on it and people just making changes just to have their ego involved in the project.
Yeah, that's why I have my show as well. I just try to be a small part. I mean, I'm a fan first and foremost, and I mean anything I could do to promote somebody such as yourself, anybody that I feel passionate about. That's what I do. I mean, any idiot can just stand in front of a microphone. I mean, it's the passion you have as a fan and the interest to spread the word about your music and other people's music as well. But yeah. So it's been great. It's been fun, Jeff. Cool. It's crossed this off my bucket list. Okay. Cool. I really enjoyed my time with you. And you want to give out your website? It's www.jeffjams. Jeff Young Jams.
There's 3 main links to pretty much get to anything you want to get to. All my new music, my newest jams. When people write me, "What are you up to? Have you done anything since Megadeth?" Like, yeah, I've done a couple things. Instrumentalguitar.net is my Bandcamp, and that's where the first 4 singles from my instrumental album. The album's going to be called Revolutions, like a turntable, or like what we need to go what we need to go on outside our doors right now with all the kookiness out there. I think we
Yeah.
need a revolution. So that's instrumentalguitar.net. Then my main hub is jeffyoungsongs.com, and that will take you to a lot of places. And that's like the pretty kind of, colorful site. And then my radio show is the one that's jeffyoungjams.com. And that's where you can find 9.5 years of radio show archives with guests from Pat Travers to John Five to Steve Harris's daughter, Lauren Harris, and her band 6 Hour Sundown, to the lead singer from Kansas, Ronnie Platt, who's doing an admirable job for Steve Ross, stepping in for Steve Walsh. I've had so many amazing guests. I've had Chris Poland, Nick Menza, Kiko Laredo, and I got a couple other
We're all on
Megadeth on
Megadeth,
my
by the
show.
way.
And those are all in the back episodes and not hard to find.
Wow, this is great. Oh, by the way, you played with the Appice Brothers and Jim Crean. Jim Crean told me to tell you to say hello.
Cool.
And you're a great guitarist.
Ahoy, Jim. That was a blast. And again, that stuff's like all unrehearsed, like all the covers. In Vegas, that's what we do. It's just we get together, and that kind of whole era that starts with, I think it's funny that they call it Sin City, and the first video of my Vegas era was Highway to Hell, and then Number of the Beast, doing both solos on that.
Wow.
And then, so all those covers were at jam nights and things that took place in Las Vegas where you're coming together.
Yeah, Jim
You're just doing your best for the people, and it's just a fun thing. And those are some of my favorite jamming moments. And that's a cool thing about Vegas that's different than a lot of cities. At least before 2020, there was a real cool, you could find somewhere to jam any night of the week if you wanted to go out and play with somebody.
Yeah. Jim has 3 covers out. He just released another one called Serpentine. That's 3
his cover. What
he's got.
was that cover he just did?
Oh, he did a lot of them. I mean,
oh man. Well, the video, he just did a full video. It came out a while ago. It's a good one.
We Die Young. He did the Alice in Chains. He's done. I mean, so there's so many. They're all posted up on my. They're all posted on my site.
Did he do the Rod Stewart song Passion?
He did Passion with Carmine Appice.
That one, that was killer.
Yeah, he did that. Yeah, so he says to tell you what's up,
Jim. Yeah, that was fun. And that was the Drum Wars thing that happened at Vamped out in Vegas, and it was Ron Mancuso on bass from Red Dragon Cartel.
Right.
He was the one that kind of helped Jake get going, and I played guitar, and Vinny
played drums,
and Jim singing. And there's also a video. The encore was Andrew Freeman.
Was in Last in Line.
Last in Line. Got a
Warrant.
Stand Up and Shout, and that came out pretty.
That's awesome.
Pretty off the hook.
It's been great, Jeff. I can't thank you enough. Like I said, cross this off my bucket list. I'll be a fan forever. I'll post whatever you have. Just send it to me, and I'll keep posting anything you have, and hopefully we'll get to speak to you again soon.
I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Jeff.
So much.
Thanks. And